Welcome to Politics Done Right. My name is Egberto Willis, your host, and today we're here with Brett Edkins, and he is with, and I won't say it, he will.
Stand Up America.
Hey, let me tell you, the reason I wanted to talk to you is I heard you know everything there is to know about the Supreme Court.
Not true, but
you know, it's close enough for government work, you know,
Sure.
that we can say that. Now, this is how I define the Supreme Court. I define the Supreme Court as the only undemocratic branch of government. Okay? Now, I don't think you would have said the same. Explain.
well, it is virtually undemocratic. The Senate is also not a purely democratic
True.
institution. There are 2 senators from California and 2 from Wyoming.
From Wyoming, yes.
Doesn't make a lot of sense.
Right.
But you're absolutely right. It's purposefully somewhat divorced from
Right.
regular day-to-day politics.
Mm-hmm.
That's partly by design, but when the court gets as extreme as it is right now, you start to see the weaknesses of that system.
Well, let me ask you this, because there rarely anybody who would just come and say, "Oh, it's by design," even though I know that, and I have reasons to believe why it is by design. But you tell me, why is it by design?
Well, judges are supposed to be fair, balanced, uninfluenced by day-to-day politics,
Right.
uninfluenced about whether they need to run for re-election and be popular.
Mm-hmm.
They're supposed to be defending the rights of minorities, people who are marginalized, people who need a court
Right.
to give them a fair hearing. That's why justice is blind.
Right.
And that is obviously not exactly what's happening now. We have
Right.
a lot of money and politics feeding into the nomination system, who gets nominated, who becomes a lower court judge, and then who becomes a Supreme Court judge, to the point where we're at now, where the court is as partisan and as divided as ever.
You said that the reason why you have this in effect, paraphrasing you want them to be measured and not worried about re-election and that sort of stuff. Of course, if you're in a state like Texas, we elect our judges from Supreme Court judges all the way down.
Yeah.
And, I guess our Supreme Court now is just as corrupt as the current Supreme Court. So it seems to me like, in effect, neither one work. Whether they vote them in or they're elected in, or they're elected in or they're appointed in, it seems like the results can be the same. So maybe should we vote them in?
Well,
I'm just
No, Sandra Day O'Connor and other justices have long warned about the dangers of electing judges at a state level.
And
There's
I
a lot
agree.
of problems with
Yes.
it. There's obviously also a lot of problems with having justices who linger on until they either die or retire at the time that they want. They politically retire when a Republican or a Democrat can appoint their replacement.
Right.
You have RBG, who held on for dear life until she hoped Hillary Clinton would be able to appoint her replacement. That's also a problem. That's why we need term limits at the Supreme Court. We need expansion at the Supreme Court. We need reforms.
You know, I have always been anti-term limits because I believe the people have the right to elect who they elect. But I think that's a good compromise. It's not a compromise. I think it should be a requirement, because if you're appointed and not easily removed from appointment, I think term limits should be that fail-safe method. So and I don't think that's a hard argument to put out there at all.
No, there's long been bipartisan agreement.
Yeah. There is bipartisan
there
agreement.
There have been Republicans in the past that know currently, because Republicans have an advantage on the court. But in times before, when they didn't have quite the advantage, plenty of Republicans have recognized that term limits make sense. It would bring some stability to the court. Every president would basically get to appoint 2. And they would serve 18-year terms as the common.
Also, it's 18 years?
That's the most common proposal. So that every president gets 2. And you wouldn't have a situation where someone like Obama, who served 8 years, only got 2 justices. And Trump, 4 years,
4 years, 3. Makes absolutely
no sense. And it doesn't reflect the people and what they want.
But you know what is so funny about that you brought that up? We have a president that got elected by the Electoral College, not by popular vote. And he is the one that got to put the most people on the Supreme Court. I mean, it's almost like a double on democracy. Double on democracy. So what are you doing, your organization doing? What's the name of the organization?
Stand Up America.
Stand Up America. What is your organization doing to try to mitigate this? In other words, to try to educate folks that we need to start electing people that are going to get these proposals out in the fold.
Well, we're working really hard right now to tell members of Congress that they need to endorse the Judiciary Act, which is the bill that would add 4 seats to the Supreme Court. And to take it seriously. Members of Congress tend to see this proposal as radical, when in fact, Congress has changed the size of the Supreme Court 7 times in our history.
Oh, is it 7? Okay,
7 times, and it's usually in situations like this where the court has become so far far out of whack with where the people are that it needs structural reform in order to change. So we're working really hard to build co-sponsorship on the Judiciary Act, build support for term limits, build support for a Supreme Court Code of Ethics, which thankfully this coming week the Senate Judiciary is going to vote on. And just building momentum for those reforms that used to have bipartisan support, desperately needed now. It may not happen this year, but I think we're slowly building and educating people about the need for reform.
Interestingly, the president has come out and said that he doesn't support that. Now, is he just playing not to give the Republicans an issue in 2024?
I think partly, and Joe Biden is a moderate Democrat, and he is the president. He kind of represents and tries to represent where the middle of the country is. But he, like in the voting rights fight, when we tried to pass the For the People Act and the Freedom to Vote Act, Joe Biden came along a little later and realized we need to change the filibuster. He's a senator. He was there a long time. So he liked the filibuster. He thought it worked. And then when he was finally confronted and said, my choice is between democracy and this Jim Crow relic, he chose right. We're not at that deciding point yet on court expansion. We still need members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus.
Yeah, he's going to wait to be led.
I think so. And I think that's the role of organizers, is to convince, to educate, and build a space where more and more politicians recognize court expansion is not a crazy idea. It's actually the only constitutionally protected and tested way to hold the court in check and create a permission structure for Joe Biden and others to say, this is okay, this is what we need to do, our rights are at stake, our rights to free productive health, to voting rights, to a clean environment. All of this is at stake at the court. And if they don't do anything about the court, we can pass all the legislation we want, but we won't be living in the country we deserve.
Well, you know what? I'm going to hold you to that. So I'm going to remind you, I'm going to find you after we win in 2024, after that bill passes, and whether he signs that bill. I'm going to remind you.
Okay. We've got a long road, but we're going to get there.
Let me tell you, give me a closer here. Your thoughts on the Supreme Court. Where are we going from here? Give me a closer.
Well, we had a rough term. The Supreme Court has gotten a lot of credit in the press, but in just this year, they got rid of decades of affirmative action precedent. They opened the door to discrimination against LGBTQ Americans. They narrowly decided not to embrace radical theories of electoral change and voting rights. But this is the court that a year ago struck down Roe v. Wade. They have a lot of cases on deck to expand gun rights and make gun violence even more prevalent in our country, and to roll back environmental protections. The court is an ongoing danger, and the 6-3 supermajority that the conservatives have is an active threat to all of the freedoms that you and I hold dear. So if people want to get involved, I would say go to standupamerica.com, help us out, help us lobby and organize, and tell your members of Congress to get on board with reforming the Supreme Court.
Brett, it's been an honor. Thank you so kindly for being here, and you have a wonderful rest of your conference.
Thanks, enjoy it.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead, number 1, subscribe to our channel, and number 2, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share.